In the winter of 1953, a young seminary student named Mykola Bondarenko volunteered to spend 3 nights praying over the body of a woman from his village. It was an old tradition. Someone had to stay with the dead, to pray, to keep vigil. He was young and brave and did not believe in the old stories. He survived the first night. He survived the second. On the third night, his fellow students found him at dawn, pressed into the corner of the room, unable to speak. His hair had turned completely white. He was 19 years old. He never spoke about what he had seen. Not once, not ever. The old people in the village did not ask questions. They knew what happened to those who kept vigil without proper protection. They knew what came on the third night. They called it the Vi. In all of Slavic mythology, across centuries of legends, folk accounts, and village chronicles, the Vi stands alone. Not because he is the most dangerous, though he is. Not because he is the most terrifying, though he is that too. But because of the specific and deeply strange nature of his power. He cannot see. Not because he is blind. His eyes are there, enormous and ancient and terrible. But his eyelids are so heavy, so impossibly long, that they drag on the ground around him. He cannot lift them himself. He has never been able to lift them himself. He needs help. And when someone lifts them, when those eyelids are raised and those eyes finally open and focus on you, everything in his gaze dies. Not quickly, not painlessly. Everything simply stops the way a candle stops when you pinch the flame. There and then gone. The Vi comes from the deepest layer of Slavic belief, older than the village spirits, older than the household guardians, older than almost anything else in the tradition. He is not a spirit of nature like the Leshy, not a tragic figure like the Mavka. He is something more fundamental than that. He is a spirit of judgment, of seeing, of the terrible weight of being truly looked at by something ancient enough to know exactly what you are. His name in the oldest sources connects to the word for eyelash, for the fringe of the eye. He is defined entirely by what he cannot do, and what happens when he finally does it. Descriptions of the Vi vary across regions and centuries, but certain details remain consistent. He is massive, not tall like the Leshy, but broad, dense, heavy, in a way that seems to bend the air around him. His skin is the color of earth, of deep clay, of something that has been underground for a very long time. He moves slowly. Everything about him is slow, his breathing, his movements, the way he turns his head, as if gravity has more hold on him than on anything else, as if he is only partially in the world of the living, and the rest of him remains somewhere below, somewhere darker and older and without light. And the eyelids, always the eyelids, long beyond reason, trailing on the ground like the train of a coat, gray and heavy and somehow deeply wrong in the way that things are wrong in dreams. The other spirits that accompany him, and he always comes with others. He never comes alone, must lift them. They use pitchforks in most accounts, iron pitchforks sliding under those impossible eyelids and lifting. And when they lift, when the eyes beneath finally open, the light in the room changes. Everything becomes visible in a way that nothing should be visible. Seen completely, seen finally, seen without mercy. In 1880, an ethnography named Ivan Rudchenko collected accounts from villages in the Poltava region of Ukraine of people who had encountered the Vi or believed they had. The accounts shared specific details that Rudchenko noted had never been published and could not have been shared between the villages in question. In each account, the encounter happened during a vigil over the dead. In each account, the presence was felt before it was seen, a heaviness in the air, a pressure, as if the room itself was becoming denser. In each account, the person who survived did so by the same method. They drew a circle around themselves and did not leave it. One account from a village near Poltava described a young man who kept vigil over his grandmother's body and felt the presence arrive at exactly midnight on the third night. He said the candles did not go out. They burned differently, harder, as if the flame was working against something, as if the light itself was afraid. He said he heard breathing, not from the body, from everywhere, from the walls, from the floor, from the air above him. Heavy breathing, slow and rhythmic, like something enormous resting after a long journey. And then the door opened, though he had locked it, and they came in. He could not describe them clearly. He said his mind refused to hold the images, that he remembered impressions rather than details, shapes, movement, the sound of something dragging along the floor, and in the center of it all something massive and slow that stopped in the middle of the room and stood there, breathing. He stayed in his circle. He prayed. He kept his eyes on the candle in front of him and did not look up. He said the hardest thing he had ever done in his life was not look up. That something in the room wanted him to look up with a pull he described as stronger than anything he had ever felt. At dawn they left. The door closed. The breathing stopped. The candles burned normally again. He sat in his circle until full daylight came through the window, and then he stood up, walked outside, and sat down in the snow because his legs would not carry him further. He kept vigil for 2 more nights after that. The tradition required it, and he was not a man who abandoned tradition. He drew his circle each night. He kept his eyes down. Nothing came again, but he said the room never felt the same. That something had been in it that left a weight behind, a residue of being seen. Why does the Vi come to vigils? The old accounts offer several explanations, and they are not mutually exclusive. The first is territorial. The boundary between the living and the dead is thinnest where the dead are present, and the Vi exists in that boundary, moves through it, is drawn to it the way water is drawn downhill. The second explanation is older and stranger. The Vi comes to judge. The person keeping vigil is alone in the dark with the dead, in a space between worlds, and the Vi comes to look at them, to truly see them, to know what they are. Most people, the old accounts suggest, are not worth the full weight of his attention. He comes, he stands, he breathes his heavy breathing, and he leaves without ever opening his eyes, because what he would see is not worth seeing, because the person in the circle is ordinary, and ordinary things do not require the terrible effort of lifting those eyelids. They are simply watched and found unremarkable and released. But occasionally, rarely, in the accounts, someone keeping vigil is not ordinary, has something in them that draws his attention more completely. And for those people, the others in the room begin to lift the eyelids, and the eyes open. And what happens then is not recorded in any account, because no one who experienced it fully was able to describe it afterward. The protection against the Vi was specific and ancient. You drew a circle around yourself before midnight, before the boundary thinned. You used chalk or ash or iron dust if you had it. You drew it completely, without lifting your hand, without gaps. A complete circle was a sealed world. Inside it, you were separate from whatever moved in the room. You did not look up. This was the essential rule, more important than the circle itself. The vise power required his gaze to meet yours. If you never looked up, if you kept your eyes on the floor, on the candle, on your hands, the eyelids could be lifted, and it would not matter. He could not see you if you did not look back. You prayed, not as a religious formality, but as an active practice. The words kept your mind anchored to the living world, kept you from the drift toward sleep or trance or the particular altered state that the room's atmosphere was designed to produce. The words were a rope back to the ordinary world. You held the rope, and you did not let go. And you did not, under any circumstances, respond to your name if you heard it called. The voices of the dead in the old tradition could speak on the third night. They could call your name in the voice of someone you loved. This was not the dead person speaking. It was something using the dead person's voice to make you look up. Mykola Bondarenko, the seminary student whose hair turned white in the winter of 1953, lived until 1991. He became a priest, a decision his fellow students found surprising, given what had happened. When asked why he had chosen the church after that night, he said only that he had learned something in that room that made the choice obvious. He never explained what he had learned. He never described the third night. But those who knew him well noted one consistent habit that he maintained for the rest of his life. In every room he entered, in every situation, in every circumstance. When he sat down, he always quietly, without drawing attention, traced a small circle on the floor around his chair with the toe of his shoe. Just a small circle, barely visible. A habit so ingrained it seemed unconscious. When a younger priest once noticed and asked about it, Bondarenko looked at him for a long moment and then said, "Some rooms are thinner than others. It is good to know where you stand." The vigil tradition still exists in parts of rural Ukraine. People still sit with their dead through the night. Most of them no longer draw circles or remember why you should. Keep your eyes down or know what the old people knew about the third night and what it brings. But some of them do, and those ones always sit with their backs to the wall, always keep a candle burning, always trace something on the floor before midnight, just in case something heavy and slow is moving through the thin place between the worlds. Just in case, somewhere in the dark, something enormous is trying to open its eyes. Don't look up.